I know. I promised you a new kind of lecture, and I looked into a bunch of different approaches, and I tried a bunch of different things, and it's just a long story. It was a disaster. So, go with what works. Anyway, so now we start our next section, which is we're going to start talking about digital things. And the foundation of all this digital marketing is about networks. And so today we're going to give you some background, talk about the structures of these networks. What does it mean to reach critical mass? How they're designed, and what kind of influences do networks have in our life, and how are they currently applied? Fundamentally, the main concept behind a network, it's about activity. It's about how they're linked together. But a network is no good unless it's active, that the nodes are working, that things are communicating, things are transacting. And that's highly dependent on how all your little points are clustered together, or how far apart they are, and how they're structured. And so, never before in the history of marketing could you reach so many so quickly. So why do we care about networks? Well, first of all, digital devices are everywhere, so we can contact anybody anytime. And so not only that, but we get a lot of reach without a lot of input. These systems can be self-sustaining, that once you reach critical mass and once they're going, to keep it going and to keep it active, you have to do relatively very little. There's also something called externalities, and that's that people will do things and you don't have to do anything, but you profit off of it. And a good example is social media. When people post content to social media, you don't have to go out and go get that content. All your users are doing it for you. And so things like Pinterest and everything else, or Quora, they want you to be active because that's what people are coming to this site to do. And those are called externalities. And so what these networks actually do is tell us how efficiently we reach others. As I said, it's omnipresent. How these segments are set up, that's what sets markets of how people can communicate. You also have something called Big Bang centers, and that networks can be incubators for ideas that continue to grow. And that's why Silicon Valley happened. You create social capital, meaning you have contacts who can influence others, and it impacts your decision making. So what is the definition of a network? A definition of a network is a set or pattern of relations between an object and a defined space. And so non-human networks are set by physical law, like the speed of electrons or what your connections are, how much noise do you have. Human networks can be formal and they can be informal, meaning maybe you form relationships or maybe they're informal. And they just happen to create and grow on its own. They're organic. The thing is, people impact structure as much as structure impacts people. For example, there's a huge difference in a network if you're all sitting in a classroom together at the same time twice a week. Compare that to the challenge of networking with people when you're in an online class. So the structure impacts how people are capable of doing this. On the other hand, the way people come together, they define the structure. And so that's what I mean by it works both ways. And if you look at a map of the United States, the thing you start to see is people concentrated in specific areas. And as you see the brightest dots, those are basically where all the major cities are. You see the megalopolis that goes from Washington, D.C. all the way up to Boston. And where are a lot of these big dots? Well, they're near waterways. That's the way people traveled. And so the thing that you see here is that, again, structure define how people communicate. People also define how they do it. In terms of technology, what are the things that you're concerned about regarding networks? And that's how much distance do I have and can I traverse it? Like if it's just electrons and quick, That's great. Sometimes it could be more difficult. Uh, Technology has a huge impact on everything. The bandwidth, the number of nodes, and everything else. And what I mean by Moore's law is cloudy. A lot of the improvement of electronics is because transistors get smaller and smaller and you can pack more and more in it. But they're starting to reach physical limits on how small they can make something, and that physical limit is called Moore's law. And then there are the design issues. When you set up your networks, a lot of networks have critical points. And these critical points, guess what? You take that point out, you can shut the entire network down. And once there was, this might be before your time, but there was once a whole bunch of blackouts. This was around the time of Enron going on in California. And some of them were genuine and some of them weren't. But 2 transformers going down took out an entire area. And so what are the pieces? Well, the pieces, first of all, there's something called a node. And a node could be a person, it could be an organization, it could be some type of group. Network theory has always been a field that people have studied, but now it's come under even more scrutiny just because of social networks and everything else because of the internet. And so the relationships that tie these nodes together are referred to as conduits, segments. And so you'll hear me using the words interchangeably. A dyad, which is the most primitive form of connection in an internet, is between 2 points. And between those 2 points, it could go one way, it could go the other way, it could be mutual. It could flow more towards one side than the other side, which is referred to as asymmetric, or maybe they don't talk to each other at all. And a triad is when you're talking about 3 points connected together. Now in this case it's balanced. I take out one of those segments, then all of a sudden one point becomes more valuable than the others. The basic patterns that you see in networks, centralized are like star patterns, Ys are less centralized, chains are perfectly linear. In a circle, some points just don't talk to any others. And so there's an open point. Now naturally, if I wanted to make that circle into a star, I just put a point in the middle that connects to all the other points. And so this is what they refer to as centralized networks and decentralized networks. Here's some more example of some more patterns. The thing about a line is it becomes really difficult. Why? Because I need to go through each and every person if I need to get to the other side. Now, you're starting to talk about, remember, hierarchy of effects? Now it's the probability that one person is going to go talk to another. And so naturally these are not good networks that we want. So how would I fix it? I'd have to create a new point, and that new point can go around that entire line. And so when I think about networks, and if I run into these situations, then I need to find ways to make it more efficient. Here's some more examples of patterns. This is actually dating patterns from a high school. And that kind of makes sense because, you know, you got a circle of people who tend to be the core of a high school. This one right here is kind of my favorite, and that's that you have a gal here and she dated both a bunch of guys and a girl. Yeah, you go girl. And this point here, that was Dr. Cho in high school. When we think about social networks, this is what the sociologists say. You can have egocentric networks, which is just focused more on me, sociocentric networks, which is focused on an area of people, and open systems where there's no clear boundaries, but everybody communicates together. And so the foundation of all this is based on 2 principles, homophily and influence. And what we mean by homophily is that people of like characteristics tend to be connected. What a shocker! You have to have something in common if you want to form a network. And influence is how connected people, we have an impact on each other. And so you've probably, and this is why you see things like mob mentality. Like somebody might be against something, but if everybody's going along and doing it because everybody influences each other, people don't want to break it. Here's an example of another social map, and they found out that if you're obese, there's a 71% chance that you're going to have another friend who's obese, like people. Here's the last example, and then we'll go on to the next video. But anyway, if you wanted to map something out, and so if Dr. Joe mapping out his friendships, he realized the commonality in all of it is location, that he's lived in so many different places, he has friends from different places. But just because in New Jersey is where my family is and where I grew up, so in terms of emotion, New Jersey means a lot to me. But in terms of frequency of my interactions, it's actually Northern California, and that's where my wife's family is. That's where my sister-in-law is, who introduced me to my wife, and she actually used to work for me. And so the question is what's more important? Is it about frequency or emotion? Do they impact each other? The more emotion I have, the more frequency. Quite frankly, I have this theory that in your life you have soul brothers and soul sisters. Soul brothers are people who are totally not like you, but you connect anyway, and your soul sisters are the people who are a lot like you. And these are the people you cannot talk to for 3 years, and then all of a sudden you can get together and pick up like it was yesterday. Actually, 2 weeks from now, I'm meeting someone from business school who's like that. But anyway, we'll go on with this in the next lecture.